Wanderer of the Wasteland by Zane Grey, Chapter 28, Part 1. The foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, cried Adam. Was it he who lay there with aching heart and burning eyes? Ah, again the lonely wasteland claimed him. That illimitable desert was home, whose face was that limned on the clouds and set into the beaten bossy mosaic of the sands and sculptured in the contour of the dim-colored ranges. His burros nipped the sage behind him as he lay, back against a stone on the lofty height of the Sierra Madre divide, gazing down into that boundless void. What was it that had happened? He had fled, and he lived over again for the 1,000th time. That week, that fleeting week of transport with its endless regrets, in which he had found Jeannie a home, in which the daughter of Magdalene Viri had stormed his soul. Vague and happy those first days when he bought the valley lands and flooded them with cattle. Vague because of the slow gathering of insupportable... Hang on just a second. Okay, Nick, what happened? Vague and happy those first days when he bought the valley lands and flooded them with cattle. Vague because of the slow gathering of insupportable and unconscious love. Happy because he lived with Jeannie's rapture and her romance. And vivid were some of the memories when he placed in Jeannie's little brown hand papers and deeds and bank books, and by a gesture as if by magic proclaimed to her wondering sense the truth of a tale of Aladdin. When to the serious-faced mother, pondering the cost, he announced her once more owner of the long-regretted land. When to a fire-eyed lad he had drawn aside the veil of the future. But vague, mystic as a troubled dream, the inception of a love that rose like the blaze of the sun, vague as the opaque dawn of the desert. Whenever he looked up by night or day at task or idleness, there shone the lovely face, the pale as a dawn haze star, a face like Magdalene Viri's, but with all of its beauty, but not of its passion, with all of its charm, yet none of its havoc, with youth in bloom and wide-open purple eyes, dark as midnight, staring at fate, and a voice like the voice of her mother, sweet but not mocking, haunted the dreams of the man and lived in the winds. "And you are a desert man," she had said. "Yes, a desert man," he'd replied. "There's a place I want to go someday when I am 21, Death Valley. Do you know it? My grandfather says I'm mad." "Death Valley? For such as you, stay, never go near that awful hell, the ghastly white pit and its naked red walls, the midnight furnace, winds with their wailing roar, the long, long slopes to the avalanche graves." Ah, the torment of his heart, the tragedy he would hide, and the secret he must keep, and the miniature that burned in its place, they drew her with the invisible cords of life and fate. What he would spare her surged in the air that she breathed. She'd come to him under the oaks, and yet again, quitting her friends, drawn to the lonely desert man. "They told me Jeannie's story," she said, and her eyes spoke eloquent praise, her lips denied. And so her mother and father died on the desert. Tell me, desert man, what does Death Valley look like?" "It is night, it is hell, it is death and desolation, the grave of the desert, yellow and red and gray, lonely, lonely, a silent land." "But you love it. Jeannie says the Indians call you Eagle because you have the eye of the eagle. Tell me, tell me." And she made him talk, and she came again, vague and sweet. First hours they were with their drawing pain. Was it well to wake in the night with eyes darker than the darkness peering into his soul? Her mother's eyes with all the glory and none of the shame. She had come another day, and then the next, while time stood still with its mocking weight. Not vaguely came a scene. I will tell you of the desert, and part of his story followed brief and hard. "Ah, I would be a man," she said. "I would never run. I would never hide." Mocking words from a sweet tongue, too sweet to mock. She had her mother's spirit, and Adam groped in the gloom to the glee of his devils of scorn. The grass by day and the grass by night felt the impress of his face. Then love, first real love of youth, and noble passion of man blazed as the sun in his face. Excuse me. From that revelation all was clear in the bursting light of calamity. Ruth was coming under the oaks. She liked the cool shade and hated the glare. She was 19, with a woman's form and her mother's eyes, proud, sweet, and aloof. "Desert man, I'm lonesome," she said. "My grandfather has gone again. He is chasing some new will-o'-the-wisp, gold and mines, cattle and land, and now it's water. He has an ear for every man." "Lonesome? You? What do you know of loneliness?" asked Adam. "There's a loneliness of soul." "Ah, but you're young. Go help Jeannie plan her home." "Jeannie and Jean, two people with but one voice, they can't hear or see anyone but themselves. It's a pity to invade their paradise. I will not. And oh, how beautiful the world must be to them." "Ruth, is it not so to you?" "Beautiful lands and greens and waters," she exclaimed in restless discontent. "But I cannot live on scenery. There is joy here, but none for me. I lost my mother, and I can't forget. She had to leave me and go with him, my father who loved me as a child and hated me as a girl. Oh, it's all a mystery. She went with him to the desert. Gold mad, she said he was. She had her debt to pay, and I could not be taken to Death Valley." "You've never heard from her since the parting?" "Never, and I am a woman now. Someday I will go to Death Valley." "Why?" he asked. "Because they went there." "But no one lives long in that valley." "Then I will find their graves," she said. "Ruth, you must not. What good can come of your traveling there? I've told you of its desolate and forbidding nature. You're all wrong. Wait. Perhaps your mother will. Perhaps you will hear of her someday." "Oh, desert man, I was a child when we parted. I'm a woman now. I want to know. The mystery haunts me. She loved me. Ah, so well. Sometimes I cannot bear to live. My grandfather hides me in lonely places. We meet but few people, and those he repels. It's because of me. Desert man, I am lonelier than was Jeannie. She is like a bird. She must have lived on the sun and the winds, but I am no child, and I am forlorn." Brooding purple eyes of trouble, of longing, of discontent, of fire for life, the heart and soul from Ruth Veary, the heritage of need and unrest, shone from her eyes. All unconsciously she longed to be loved. She stood on the threshold of womanhood like a leaf in a storm. "Talk with me and walk with me, desert man," she said wistfully. "You were Taquich for Jeannie, be eagle for me. Your eyes know the desert, where my mother sleeps, where perhaps her spirit wanders. You soothe my troubled heart. Oh, I can feel myself with you, for you understand." Thus Adam so a storm. Magdalene Veary had presaged the future. In the dark stillness of the night, sleepless, haunted, tossed by torment, it was revealed to him that Magdalene Veary had risen out of the depths of noble love for him, and through that love she'd seen with mystic eyes into the future. She'd projected that love into the spirit of the desert, and it had guided Adam's wandering steps to her daughter Ruth. Was this only a wanderer's dream as he lay on the hills? Was it only a knot in the tangled skein of his desert life? Was it inscrutable design of a power he disdained? Be what this might, the one great love of his years possessed him, fierce and resistless, on its march to his defeat. It mocked his ordeal. It flaunted a banner in his face, noble love, noble passion, love of the soul, all that revered woman, wife, mother, and babe. He'd found his mate. Strange how he remembered Margarita Arrhenius and the wild boy's love of a day. Poor, pale, wasteful, sinful, lustful little gleam. And he recalled the spell of Jeannie, that strong call of nature in the wilderness. Above both he had arisen, but Ruth Fury was the woman. He could win her. The truth beat at his temples, constricted his throat. Ruth was the flower of her mother's tragic longing to be loved. Ruth burned with that longing, and life was not to be denied. Magdalene Very had given him this child of her agony. She trusted the fate of Ruth in his hands. She saw with superhuman eyes. A deep tenderness for Ruth pervaded Adam's soul. Who of all men could love her, save her, content her as he? It was not thought of her kisses, of her embraces that plucked at the roots of his will. Like a passing wave, the thrill of such bliss went out to the might of a nobler tide. To save Ruth from the fate of her mother, from the peril of her own heart, and in the saving a home, happiness, the tender smile of a mother, and the kiss of a child. But I am a criminal. I am a murderer. Any day I might be hanged before her very eyes. He whispered with his face in the grass, his fingers digging the turf. Still, no one would ever marvel at that now. But he, that human wolf Collishaw, would not he know me? Oh, if there be a God, help me in my extremity. Once again he met her. As he rode up the valley at sunset, she came out of the oak grove. I've been with Jeannie. Desert men, her happiness frightens me. Oh, I love her. You tell me of your hard, lonely, terrible desert life, why your ears should ring with bells of joy forever. It is you who have built her castle. What other deeds like that have you done in those bitter years you tell of? Not many, Ruth, perhaps not one. I don't believe you. I'm learning you, the desert man, and oh, I wish you knew how it swells my heart to hear Jeannie tell of what you did for her. Every day she tells me something new, and more, for today she said you would be leaving soon. Yes, Ruth, soon, he said. Back to the lonely land? Yes, back to the sage and sand and the big dark hills. Yes, it will be a lonely land, he replied sadly. And you will wander down the trails until you meet someone, some woman or child or man, sick or miserable or lost, and then you will stop. Adam had no answer. The Indians called you Eagle, she went on, and her tone startled him with its hint of remembered mockery. You have the desert eye. You see so far, but you don't see here. Why should you waste your splendid strength, your magnificent manhood, wandering over the desert if it's only for unhappy people? Desert man, you are great, but you could do more good here. You could find more misery here. I know one whose heart is breaking, and you've never seen for all your eagle eye. End of chapter.